I inherited a house from my aunt and found my cousin living there with fake papers. 3 days earlier, I was sitting in my apartment in Chicago, halfway through reheating leftover pad thai, when the envelope arrived. No stamp, hand-delivered. That was the first odd thing. The second was the name printed on the front, Mr. Edwin Holt. Nobody called me Mr., unless they were trying to sell me something or sue me. I opened it slowly, unsure if I was about to get hit with jury duty or worse, a bill from my dentist. But instead I found something unexpected, a formal, cream-colored letter with the kind of embossed seal you only see in movies. My eyes went straight to the bolded line in the middle. Under the last will and testament of Maybelle Holt, the property located at 18 Laurel Drive, Shelbyville, Illinois, has been left to you, her nephew and sole heir. I had to read it 3 times. Aunt Maybelle? Dead? And I was her sole heir? I leaned back in my chair, blinking. The pad thai beeped in the microwave behind me, but I didn't move. I hadn't seen Aunt May in over a year, but I'd called her every few months. She was one of the few people in my family who actually listened when I talked, even when I was a kid babbling about building robots out of cereal boxes. She used to make me peanut butter cookies and let me stay up late watching old sci-fi movies when my parents were fighting. After she'd moved back to Shelbyville full-time, our contact had faded, but never fully disappeared. And now, she'd left me her house. I looked again at the address. 18 Laurel Drive. I hadn't thought about that place in years. The house with the squeaky front steps, the big apple tree in the backyard, and the living room that always smelled like cinnamon and cedar. A little haunted, in that charming way old houses are. I called the number listed for the law office. A bored-sounding secretary transferred me to someone named Mr. Havers. "Ah, yes, Mr. Holt," came a crisp, dry voice. "We've been expecting your call. Do you have time to come in this week?" "I can be there tomorrow," I said, still not entirely convinced I hadn't misunderstood something. "Excellent. Bring ID. The documents will be ready." The next morning, I packed an overnight bag and drove out of the city. It had rained the night before, and the highway shimmered with heat and leftover mist. As the buildings thinned and the flat Midwestern fields stretched out around me, I called my sister, Monica. She picked up on the 4th ring. "What?" She said, "No hello, no warmth. Classic Monica. Did you hear about Aunt May?" A pause. "Yeah, a week ago. We weren't exactly close. Why?" "She left me her house." Another pause. Then, "Wait, what?" "Yeah. Got the letter yesterday. I'm heading to Shelbyville now to meet her lawyer." She made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. "Weird. I thought she was still living with Sabrina. Didn't she say something about moving in to help her out?" That name sent a jolt through me. Sabrina, our cousin. My uncle's daughter from his second marriage. The one who was always borrowing money, faking migraines, and somehow managing to show up at every family event in a designer coat someone else probably paid for. "I thought she was living in L.A., I muttered. "Well," Monica said, "Sabrina always seems to land where the money is." Mr. Havers's office was exactly what I expected. Neat, dark wood panels, dusty law books lining the shelves. He was older than I imagined, with white hair combed straight back and fingers that tapped rhythmically on the desk while he read me the will. "There is no codicil," he confirmed. "This document was signed and notarized 6 months ago. All perfectly legal." "Did she mention Sabrina?" I asked. He looked up briefly, then shook his head. "Your cousin visited occasionally, but Miss Holt made it clear in her instructions. The house is yours, fully." He handed me a folder. Inside were the deed, a copy of the will, and a brass key on a plain ring. It felt oddly heavy in my palm. "Thank you," I said. "Did she say why?" Mr. Havers hesitated for half a second. She said, quote, "Edwin doesn't ask for much. He just does the right thing. That's all she said." Then she smiled. My throat tightened, but I nodded. That sounds like her. The house looked exactly how I remembered and completely different at the same time. The old wooden fence sagged in places, and weeds had overtaken most of the front yard. The porch light was still hanging, though crooked, and the wind chime by the door jingled just like it used to. But something was off. The gate wasn't latched. The porch swing creaked as if someone had just gotten up, and there was a faint smell of lavender and chamomile. Fresh, recent. I stepped onto the porch and unlocked the door with the brass key. It turned easily, like it had been used recently. Inside, I froze. There was a pair of boots by the door, a half-empty coffee mug on the kitchen counter, and down the hallway, movement. Then a voice, unmistakably familiar, syrupy sweet. Well, look who finally decided to show up. I turned. Sabrina stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing a silk robe and holding what looked like a folder full of papers. She smiled like a cat who just got the cream. "Welcome home, cousin." The house smelled like tea and something faintly floral, lavender, maybe, and it hit me the moment I stepped inside. Everything looked lived in, not just dusty from neglect, but freshly used, the kind of house someone had made themselves comfortable in. There was a scarf hanging on the stair banister. A tabby cat blinked at me from the windowsill near the front door, stretched and slinked away without a sound. The gate had been open when I arrived. The upstairs bedroom window was cracked just slightly, letting in a spring breeze that carried in the scent of wet grass. And now there was the unmistakable sound of movement from the kitchen, the clink of porcelain, maybe a spoon stirring in a mug. I walked slowly, trying to make sense of the warmth in the air, the faint hum of a kettle still cooling. The house wasn't abandoned. Someone was already here. I turned the corner into the kitchen, and there she was, standing barefoot in front of the stove, wearing pale satin pajamas and a gray cardigan. Sabrina looked like she'd walked out of a lifestyle blog and taken a wrong turn into someone else's memory. She glanced over her shoulder without surprise, as if she'd been expecting me all along. "Oh," she said casually, raising an eyebrow. "What are you doing in my house?" I blinked. "Your house?" She smiled slowly, then turned back to her tea. "Yes, my house." I stared at her, trying to figure out if I'd heard her wrong, or if this was some elaborate prank. "Sabrina, Aunt May left the house to me. I have the papers. The lawyer read me the will." "Oh, I know," she said, still perfectly calm. "You have the old will." She reached into a folder sitting on the counter and pulled out a stack of papers, photocopies, crisp, neatly stapled. The top page bore a familiar letterhead, Maybelle Holt's name, dated, notarized, with a signature at the bottom. "This," she said, handing it to me, "is the updated will." Aunt May changed her mind. She signed this 2 weeks before she passed. I took the document, my hands suddenly cold. "What?" She realized I was the one who'd been here. I moved in, took care of her when her legs started giving out. I was the one driving her to doctor's appointments, making sure she ate. "She said you hadn't visited in years." "She never asked me to," I said automatically, my voice low. Sabrina shrugged and sipped her tea. "Well, she changed her mind. People do that, especially at the end." I flipped through the pages, searching for inconsistencies. It looked official. Signatures, dates, even a notary's stamp. I couldn't say whether it was fake or not, but it didn't sit right. Something about it felt off, manufactured. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "Mr. Havers said there was no new will, that the one I have is the only legal version." Sabrina crossed her arms and leaned against the counter. "Maybe your Mr. Havers didn't get the memo. She worked with someone else for the revision. A local guy. I can get you his name if you're feeling litigious." Her voice was casual, but her eyes were sharp, scanning my reaction, gauging how far she could push. "I'm calling Havers," I muttered, pulling out my phone. "Be my guest," she said, turning back to her tea. The call rang twice before the familiar dry voice picked up. "Mr. Holt? Mr. Havers, I'm at the house. There's a complication." "I see. Go on. My cousin is here, Sabrina. She claims there's a second will, more recent, signed and notarized." A long pause. "That is highly irregular," he said finally. "May I assume she showed you photocopies? I'll need to see them immediately. Can you bring them to the office? She won't leave. She says she lives here now." Another pause. "Then I suggest you don't confront her further tonight. Bring the documents tomorrow morning. I'll review their authenticity. In the meantime, I strongly advise against engaging in conflict. These matters can escalate." I hung up and turned to Sabrina. "He wants to see the documents, first thing tomorrow." "Perfect," she said sweetly. "I'll make you a copy." She moved toward a printer on a side table, like she'd prepared for this moment. Within a minute, she handed me a second set of pages, complete with faux cheer. "I know this is awkward," she said, her voice suddenly soft, a practiced vulnerability sliding into place. "But, Edwin, I lived here. I took care of her. I was with her. You have your own life in Chicago, your job, your nice little apartment with your sushi takeout or whatever. This house?
It was mine for months before she passed.
I don't have anywhere else. You never mentioned any of this, I said quietly. Her smile flickered. Would you have cared? I opened my mouth, then closed it. She was good. Still knew how to twist a line just like she had in high school plays. Always the lead, always crying on cue. She had that same performative fragility now, except older, a little frayed around the edges. Still pretty, but something in her was hollowed out. Or maybe it had always been that way. You can't just squat in a dead woman's house and pretend it's yours, I said finally. I'm not squatting, she replied sharply. I was invited, and I stayed, because I was needed. You wouldn't understand, you were never here. A beat passed between us, cold and heavy. I took the copied papers and walked to the door. I'll be back tomorrow, she gave a mock salute. I'll put the kettle on. Outside, the air smelled like rain again. The cat had returned to the porch and watched me with indifferent eyes. As I walked back to the car, the weight of the folder in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Tomorrow, I'd find out if Sabrina was a liar, or if Aunt May had somehow changed her mind in the very last days, but deep down, I already knew which one it was. The air in Mr. Haver's office always smelled like old paper and lemon polish, as if the dust was part of some sacred legal tradition. Shelves lined the walls. Thick binders, boxes with handwritten labels, yellowed folders stacked high like miniature monuments to other people's drama. Havers sat behind his desk, the newel spread open under the sharp beam of a desk lamp. He didn't speak for a long time, just examined, frowned, turned a page, scribbled something in the margins. I waited, perched on the edge of a hard leather chair, clutching my coffee like it might stabilize me. Finally, he looked up. Well, it's an ambitious forgery. I blinked. You're saying it's fake? He nodded once, not conclusively yet, but the notary stamp is registered in Nevada, not Illinois. The formatting doesn't match any of Maybelle's prior documents, and the signature, while similar, lacks some of the pressure patterns I've seen in her earlier forms. Pressure patterns? Tiny things, stroke order, the way her pen used to catch slightly on the M in her name. This signature's too smooth. Almost traced. I exhaled, relief mixed with a rising anger. So she lied. She actually lied. Not necessarily, Havers said with caution. Someone may have misled her, or the document may have been created after her passing. We'll need to involve handwriting experts and the court. Before I could respond, his assistant peeked in through the door. Mr. Havers, there's a Mr. Stone here. Says he represents Miss Sabrina Holt. I turned sharply. She got a lawyer? Havers sighed. Of course she did. In strutted Darrell Stone, mid-40 seconds expensive haircut, the kind of smile that probably got him out of parking tickets. His suit looked a little too crisp for a local probate fight. He tossed a glance my way, then turned his full attention to Havers, all charm and faux civility. Lovely office, Stone said, surveying the space like a buyer appraising outdated property. I'm here on behalf of Miss Holt. She has every reason to believe her late aunt amended her will, and we're prepared to move forward with asserting her legal claim. Havers didn't blink. The documents she submitted are under review. There are inconsistencies. Which is why I'm here, Stone said smoothly. We intend full cooperation, of course. But until the matter is settled, my client is asserting her right to remain in the house, as the rightful heir. She is not the rightful heir, I snapped. Stone turned to me as if noticing me for the first time. Ah, you must be Edwin Holt, cousin, out of town. No recent contact with the deceased until the reading of the will, yes? I stood up. You don't know anything about my relationship with Aunt May. I know your absence speaks volumes, he said, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. Sabrina was there. For months, cleaning bedpans and making soup, while you were doing God knows what in Chicago. I could feel the blood in my ears. This is about a forged will, not soup. Then let's let the court decide, shall we? He said lightly. Back at the house, the atmosphere was thick with territorial silence. Sabrina was in the sunroom, legs curled under her on the couch, laptop open in front of her like a shield. A fresh mug of tea steamed on the table beside her. Your lawyer's an ass, I said, dropping my bag near the stairs. She didn't look up. He's expensive. That's usually how it works. You don't even deny it? She finally turned to me, her expression unreadable. I did what I had to do. Aunt May didn't have anyone else. Did she actually change her will, or did you just find a template online and get creative? Her lips curled into a practiced, wounded smile. Do you want to believe she didn't love me enough to leave me something? I want the truth. Sabrina stood up slowly. The truth is, you abandoned this place years ago, and now you show up with your righteous little claims, acting like some kind of savior. I'm not the one selling her furniture on Facebook. She froze. I saw the posts, I said, stepping closer. Aunt May's rocking chair, her vanity, even the dining table, all listed under some profile called Brevintage Home. You didn't even wait for the dust to settle. Her face flushed, and for a second the mask cracked. That's none of your business. It is if you're looting the place. I lived here. I kept it running. I paid the bills when her Social Security check didn't cover it. You think the light stayed on out of charity? You could have asked the family for help. There was no family, Edwin, she snapped. Just me. And now you want to erase that? Pretend I was never here? The house creaked in the silence that followed. Somewhere upstairs the cat leapt from a surface, the faint sound of a thud and a meow. I stared at her. Why didn't you call me? Just once? She looked down. Because I knew you wouldn't come. The next morning, I logged into the estate's financial account, or tried to. The password had been changed. My access was revoked. Tax forms, blocked. Aunt May's personal documents on the shared family portal, restricted. She filed an injunction to freeze the estate's assets, he said grimly, claiming the will is in dispute. Until a judge makes a ruling, everything's in limbo. So she's playing dirty. She's playing to win. In just 2 days, it had become a war. Not just of documents and signatures, but of memory. Who Aunt May really trusted, who she really loved, and who had the right to claim her legacy. And I wasn't even sure I liked the game we were playing anymore, but I was already in it, and so was she. I hadn't stepped into the attic in over a decade. The pull-string light flickered as it came to life, casting long shadows over piles of boxes, moth-eaten linens, and suitcases that hadn't traveled in years. Dust swirled with every step I took, rising in lazy spirals like ghosts disturbed from sleep. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a sense of grounding. Maybe something to prove that the house still belonged to Maybelle, not to Sabrina's stories or her lawyer's smug grin. I opened the first box, old photos, curled with time. A newspaper clipping of Aunt May's retirement, a dried corsage, birthday cards from me, back when my handwriting was still uneven and wide. But it wasn't until the third box that I found something unusual, a small leather-bound journal wedged between a stack of cookbooks and a faded quilt. It was heavier than it looked. The pages were yellowed but mostly blank. Only a few entries were written, in her careful, slanted script. March 3rd. Sabrina brought me tea this morning. Chamomile. She said it helps me sleep. She's been sweet today. Too sweet. I feel watched. Or maybe just tired. I miss Edwin. I should write him. April 17th. I told her I didn't want to change anything. She said it wasn't about want. It was about fairness. She says I'm confused, but I'm not. I know what she's doing. The last page had no date. If anything happens, Edwin deserves the truth. It's all in the flash drive. I sat still for a moment, the weight of those words sinking into my chest like a stone. A flash drive? I turned the attic upside down, searched every box in the same corner, flipped through envelopes, shook out books like they might whisper something, and then I saw it, tucked inside a battered copy of Little Women, between pages worn thin at the spine. Something small and hard wedged between Beth Dye's and a folded corner in Joe's chapter. A black USB flash drive. My fingers were trembling as I took it downstairs and plugged it into my laptop. It contained one video file. The image was grainy. Aunt May sat propped up in her recliner, the crocheted afghan over her legs, her silver hair a bit messier than usual. She held the phone at an angle, and the light behind her window made her look almost translucent. She cleared her throat softly before speaking. If you're watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you in person. Her voice cracked. Not from weakness, but something deeper. Sadness, maybe, or fear. I never wanted this house to become a battleground. I raised Sabrina after her parents died. I loved her. But love doesn't mean trust. She's changed. She swallowed hard. She's pressuring me, every day. Telling me I need to correct the will, that Edwin won't understand, that he'll sell the place, that he doesn't care. She says I'm being manipulated by my memories. Maybelle looked away for a moment, then back at the screen. Her eyes were wet. She threatened to take me to a lawyer herself. She said she'd say I wasn't lucid anymore. I've always been sharp, Edwin. You know that. Don't let them say otherwise. She paused, biting her lip. I did what she asked once. I signed the new will, but I changed it back. The old one stands. You'll find it with Havers. I didn't trust her enough to tell her. I knew she'd try something. She leaned forward, voice trembling now. You were always good, steady. You called, you cared, even if you were far away. This house was yours long before I made it legal. I saw how you looked at it when you were young. I saw how you loved it. Sabrina just wants the money. But you'll do the right thing. A long silence, just her breathing. Then she looked straight at the lens again. I'm tired, but I'm not confused. The video ended. The room felt colder after that. I sat back in my chair, my jaw locked tight. My aunt's voice echoed in my ears, the words wrapping around everything I tried to suppress. The anger, the betrayal, the guilt of not being there when maybe she needed me most. I copied the video to a secure folder, then to a cloud drive. I wasn't about to let this vanish. Downstairs, I heard the front door open and close. Sabrina. I grabbed the journal and headed to the top of the stairs. She looked up at me from the hallway, a shopping bag in one hand, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. I held up the journal. Did you know she kept this? Her eyes narrowed. That's private. I descended the stairs slowly. So was the will. But you had no problem tampering with that. She shifted the bag to the other hand. What are you talking about? She did sign your version, but then she changed it back. She said so, in her own words, on video. She left proof. For a split second, she paled. Then the mask snapped back on. You don't know what she was going through. She wasn't well. Her mind. She was sharper than either of us, I said. And she knew exactly what you were doing. The silence between us was taut, ticking. You don't have the right to ruin this for me, Sabrina said quietly. I gave up everything to stay with her. No, I said. You gave up nothing. You gambled, and now you're about to lose. The next morning, I was at Mr. Havers' office before the receptionist had even finished her first cup of coffee. I need you to see this, I said, placing my laptop on his desk. He adjusted his glasses, clicked the video file, and watched without interrupting. The only sign of emotion was the tightening of his jaw. When the screen went black, he exhaled deeply. Well, that changes everything. She said you'd have the real will, I added, the one she signed after Sabrina pressured her. I do, he nodded. Filed and time-stamped months before this so-called revision. He picked up the phone. I'm calling the police and the notary office. If Sabrina forged a legal document, we need to move fast. Within an hour, we were sitting across from a weary-eyed officer in a cramped room at the precinct, handing over the video and a printed copy of the will with Aunt May's signature. Havers spoke in clipped, confident sentences. I mostly sat there and clenched my fists. The officer raised his brows. You're saying the niece submitted a forged document to contest the estate? She did more than that, Havers said. She tried to hijack the house, stall financial access, and presented notarized pages with inconsistencies. Do you have the originals? Only scanned copies, I said. She refused to hand them over. The officer scribbled notes. We'll get a warrant, and we'll need access to her devices. That evening, Sabrina was brought in for questioning. I didn't see the moment they knocked on the door, but I heard about it soon enough. Apparently, she'd screamed at the officer and tried to slam the door in his face. She was hysterical, the receptionist at the firm told me later. Said Edwin was a liar, called him a snake, a backstabbing little thief. I wasn't shocked. I'd seen that tantrum brewing behind her eyes for days. They confiscated her laptop. Less than 24 hours later, I got a call from Officer Diaz. You're going to want to hear this, he said. At the station, he pulled up a file path on her hard drive. There, buried under a folder named Recipes Final V, was a PDF editing program. Timestamps showed she'd used it the day before Aunt May's death. We also found the template for the revised will, Diaz said. It matches the document she gave us, right down to the spacing errors. Even the notary seal was copied from a stock file. I stared at the screen. So, it's confirmed. She faked it. She tried to make it look legit, he said, but whoever forged it wasn't careful enough. I left the station with a strange mixture of relief and fury sitting in my chest. It wasn't just that Sabrina had lied, it was how thoroughly she'd tried to bury the truth, and how close she'd come to getting away with it. But I wasn't done yet. Back at the house, I began combing through the financial papers she'd dumped in the office drawers, many of which she'd tried to hide beneath old magazines. That's when I noticed something else. Several loan statements with May's name but odd repayment structures. Lines like collateral, residential property, Eastwick address. I dug deeper and found what I was afraid of. Sabrina had taken out multiple personal loans in the last 6 months, some in her name, some falsely co-signed by Aunt May, all using the house as collateral. I printed everything and drove straight to Havers. She was already mortgaging the place, I said, slapping the stack of papers onto his desk. She didn't even own it yet, and she was using it like her personal ATM. Havers reviewed the documents with a frown. If this is authenticated, we're dealing with serious fraud, not just forgery. He passed the evidence on to the authorities. Later that week, the final confrontation came. I walked into the precinct lobby just as Sabrina was leaving the interrogation room. Her eyes were bloodshot, hair messier than usual, but her defiance hadn't faded. "You really couldn't just leave it alone, could you?" she snapped. I crossed my arms. "You tried to steal from me, from her. You think I was going to smile and hand you the keys? She owed me," she screamed, loud enough that people looked over. "I gave up everything for her, my career, my apartment. I wiped her damn mouth, Edwin. You did those things because you thought you'd get paid for it. She promised me." "No," I said coldly, "she promised me. And she changed the will back because she realized what you were doing." Her voice cracked, but she masked it with a bitter laugh. "You think that house is some kind of prize? You think you win now?" I didn't answer. Because honestly, I didn't know yet. The room was too cold, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the way the walls seemed to echo with judgment. I sat across a long mahogany table in Havers' law office, next to him on one side. On the other sat Sabrina and her smirking attorney, Mr. Darrell Stone. Still cocky, still too comfortable. At the head of the table was a court-appointed mediator and a representative from probate court, flipping silently through a manila file. "Before we proceed," Havers said, pressing a button on the small remote in front of him, "we'd like to submit one final piece of evidence." The lights dimmed slightly. The screen on the wall blinked to life. There she was, Aunt May, sitting in her favorite floral chair, hands folded, expression weary but composed. "If you're watching this," she began, voice shaking just a little, "then I'm probably gone. And something's wrong." Sabrina stiffened, one hand gripping the edge of the table. The room fell silent. "I'm making this video because I don't trust that the papers I signed will stay the way I left them. I changed my will back. I want Edwin to have the house. He's always been kind, and he won't sell it to the highest bidder." A pause, a glance off camera. "Sabrina, she's not the same anymore. She's been pressuring me, watching me. I don't feel safe. She says she deserves everything. But she doesn't want this place. She wants the money." The screen faded to black. No one moved. Even Stone had gone quiet. Sabrina let out a tense breath, forced a smile, and stood. "Excuse me, I have to take a call." "Sit down, Miss Lane," the mediator said sharply, but she was already halfway to the door, phone pressed to her ear, muttering, "Just a second. Urgent." She left without waiting for permission. She didn't come back. 10 minutes passed, then 15. We finally rose to check if she'd left the building, and that's when the assistant walked in, holding a navy blue leather folder. "She left this behind," she said. Stone took one look at the folder, blanched, and snatched it from her hands. Too late. The court rep was already reaching across the table. "May I?" Inside were at least 30 pages, printed, handwritten, some stained with coffee or pen marks. The first few were rough drafts of Aunt May's will. Same language, different names. In most, Sabrina was listed as sole heir, but the margins were scribbled with instructions like "add convincing clause here," and multiple trial signatures in what looked like Aunt May's handwriting, except they weren't hers. The mediator's eyes narrowed. Then came something worse, a scanned psychiatric report, dated 3 years ago, Aunt May's name at the top. The report detailed an incident where a caregiver, identified as SL, age 30, had been accused of escalating verbal and physical aggression toward the patient. The report stated that the alleged incident had been informally resolved and no charges were filed. The recommendation: change in caregiver and increased supervision. I stared at the page, heart thudding. Sell Sabrina Lane. She said Aunt May owed her, I whispered. Havers picked up the page, adjusting his glasses. This changes things. Stone stood up, clearly panicked. This isn't admissible. She didn't have permission. The court rep raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Stone. You're in no position to object right now. The folder revealed more. Notes written in different pens. A photocopy of Aunt May's driver's license. Pages that looked like signature tracing exercises. One in particular made my stomach turn. It was Aunt May's name, written over and over again until it looked perfect. Forgery practice. And next to that, a short line, underlined in red ink. No one will believe her. She's old and confused. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just greed. This was a campaign. Aunt May hadn't just suspected Sabrina. She had feared her, hid from her. The flashbacks hit like cold water. The way Aunt May would pause mid-sentence when talking about Sabrina. How she never invited her to family dinners in the last year. How she'd always locked the front door now, something she never used to do. She'd been trying to protect herself, and we hadn't seen it. The room felt smaller. Havers quietly began organizing the papers back into the folder. I'll file everything today. The court will have grounds to invalidate the forged will and possibly pursue charges. The mediator nodded grimly. I stepped outside. The late afternoon sun suddenly too bright. Sabrina was gone, no doubt trying to find another lie, but this time the truth had followed her. The court's decision came quicker than I expected. The forged will was declared null and void. The judge's words were clear. Aunt May's original will stood, and the house belonged to me. Sabrina vanished almost overnight. I didn't see her leave the city, but a few days later, her face popped up on a local news story, caught trying to manipulate another relative's inheritance. The same pattern, the same lies. I felt a bitter satisfaction, but no triumph. This wasn't about winning. It was about setting things right. The house stood silent on the edge of Shelbyville, its wooden fence still weathered, the garden wild but alive. I held the keys in my hand, a weight heavier than metal. Moving in was like stepping back in time, and forward all at once. The floors creaked with history. The walls whispered stories. I spent the first days clearing the clutter, peeling back layers of neglect and dust. Every corner held a memory. One afternoon, behind a loose panel in the attic, I found an old box. Inside was a faded photograph, Aunt May and me, sitting under the apple tree in the backyard, sun filtering through the leaves. We were both smiling, younger, lighter. On the back, in Aunt May's careful handwriting, was a simple note. The words hit me harder than anything in the courtroom. She hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me the truth. And maybe, finally, some peace. I stepped outside into the cool breeze, the scent of grass and blooming flowers filling the air. The garden was overgrown, but I could see its beauty beneath the chaos. Like this house, like the past, it just needed care and patience. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.